Hey friends, welcome to lesson 1 of module 5, Focus Basics, the one setting you are allowed to shoot in auto. So in this lesson, you will learn the foundations of focus, autofocus settings, toggling, and how focus works in your camera. Focus is the most important element to get right on a shoot because here is the honest truth. You can fix exposure issues, white balance, you can fix grainy images, crazy color cast, shadows, crappy light. You can fix all those things in post processing, but you can't fix an out of focus image. So let's make sure you have some basic settings correct to ensure the best focus possible. So, very simply, always shoot in autofocus, which is AF. So, you're going to want to make sure you check your lens often to make sure it's on AF for autofocus. I can't tell you how many times I have thrown my camera in my bag, taken it back out, started shooting, and all of my pictures were out of focus. Like my camera could not focus. Reason? Because the little switch on my lens was turned on to manual. We don't want manual focus lens pictures. We want autofocus. Like we're doing enough manual settings on our camera. We at least want our lens to do a little bit of the work on its own. That's why you need to make sure your lens is always on autofocus. So the only time I shoot in manual focus, which is the little switch on my lens that it's on M, the only time I shoot in manual focus is when I shoot the prongs of a ring with my macro lens. So this takes, it's like, sniper shooting status. I will put it on manual focus just when I'm doing that ever so often. Generally, I shoot in AF autofocus for everything else. So another thing to make sure you get the best possible focus on your images is to set your picture control or picture style to standard. So there's a lot of questions about what to set this on in your camera. The reason I put mine on standard is because what standard will do when you look back on your LCD screen after you take a picture, standard, this setting will add a little bit of sharpening to your photo on your LCD screen. So your photo will look more in focus with this setting, and you won't have to be constantly freaking out every time you take a picture. I'm like, why are all my pictures so soft? Why are they so blurry? Why aren't they in focus? Make sure that this is set to standard. Your picture style, your picture control, make sure it's set to standard, and it'll give you a little boost of confidence knowing that your picture is sharp and in focus. Just like I said, this adds a little bit of sharpening to the photo for you. So another thing that you want to make sure is that your single point autofocus is on. This allows you to move your focal point exactly where you want it. So when you're about to take a picture and you look through your viewfinder, you should only see one little square or one little dot that you are able to move with the arrows on the back of your camera. So single point autofocus, the way you get this, and we talked about this in the camera settings module, the way you get this is you're going to press the AF button on your camera, which is on the left-hand side, right next to your lens. You're going to press this button and then look on your info screen. Use your dial to make sure it's on S for single point. S means single point. There are other options like GRP, that means group, but we want to make sure it's just on one single point autofocus so that we're able to move our little dot from the center all the way up to what we want in focus, which in this picture is the bride and the groom kissing. So the center is the strongest point. Okay, so if there are also cross points, but we're not going to get into that because I honestly love my 51 options to put my focus point on, and we're going to talk about how to do that in a minute. But the center is going to be your strongest point. So the most amount of focus is going to be in the center. The further you go out, you're going to get maybe a tiny bit softer, but you're still going to be in focus. Okay. So in this picture, I moved my point, my focus point, to her eye. I wanted to make sure she was in focus, and then I moved to the grandma after. But this was at a very, very low aperture. I'm pretty sure this was probably wide open. And I moved my focus point all the way to the left up to the eye. And what this is called toggling. When you move your point with your arrows on the back of your camera, that is called toggling, and that is what I highly suggest you do in order to move your focus point and get a correct focused picture. So if this was my frame and I wanted to make sure my bride was in focus, I put my viewfinder up to my eye. What do I need to do? I literally need to toggle, 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 toggle to move my focus point to the bride. Okay. And then I get a picture like this. She's in focus. Everything else off of the X and Y axis is in that blurry, bokeh, creamy, dreamy look. So toggling takes practice. The more you do it, the faster you become. This is one of my, this is one of the things that I kind of struggled with at first, especially with families and moving kiddos and weddings, was constantly moving my toggle point to where I needed my focus point to be. But like I said, just like driver's ed, the more you do it, the more you'll be able to do it in your sleep, the better you'll get at it. So here is a little toggle hack. Okay, if you go to the custom settings menu, select autofocus, and then select store by orientation. We went over this in the camera settings module, but I wanted to go over it again here since we're talking about focus. Store by orientation means that if I'm shooting this bride and groom and I am at a vertical, I'm shooting vertically and my focus point is on her eye, and I'm like, you know what? I want to get also a horizontal picture quickly. What I do when you're on this store by orientation mode on, what you do is if I shoot vertically and then I switch my camera horizontally, it's going to automatically go where my last focus point was on. So I wouldn't have to move up, over to get back to her eye. It's going to already be there just by the orientation changing. And that's a really, really, really cool toggling hack that I think is super worth changing in your settings. So moving on, just like we talked in the aperture lesson, your focus point has an X and Y axis of focus, okay? So in this image, I know that if I put my focus point on her eye, I know that everything on the X and Y plane of her is going to be in focus. So I shot this, I believe I shot this around 1.8 with my 85 millimeter. Yes, I did. Here we go. I shot this with my 85 millimeter at 1.8. And I want you to notice everything in the focus everything in focus is on the same X and Y plane. So I focused on her eye, but also look at the groom's face. He is also in focus even with me shooting at 1.8. Her arm is in focus. Her hand is in focus. Her right hand behind his neck is in focus. All of that on the X and Y axis is in focus. But look at what's not on that X and Y axis, like her bouquet. Notice her bouquet is blurry, as well as the house and the bushes behind her is blurry because it's not on that same X and Y plane. We went over all of this in the aperture module, but you're going to get a double dose of it here in the focus module. And like I said, notice the background as well as the flowers is out of focus. It's that creamy, dreamy bokeh that I love and am known for, and that's why I can get away with shooting at 1.8 with these two people. So I broke my aperture rule because I knew of the X and Y axis focal plane rule. Okay, let's look at this picture. So notice I shot this at 1.8. Notice Alexandra's eyes are in focus. I focused on her eye and all the way down on that plane. So her sleeve, like her strap on her wedding dress, is in focus. But look at her back shoulder. Notice that that is even out of focus. Notice obviously her grandmother is out of focus because it's not on that same plane. But what is in focus? Her two eyes are in focus. I'll even notice that I think her nose is a tiny bit soft because it's not on that same plane. Her nose comes out a little bit further out than her eyes, and so it's also not on that plane. If you also really kind of notice her ears are softer and out of focus because they're not on that X plane. So I think this is like one of the most interesting things about photography, aperture, and focus, just like those simple rules and how they apply and how we can use them to make creative images. Yes, notice her eyes are in focus, her ears, but her ears, grandmother, and front of her dress is out of focus. Yes, her front of her dress, you can definitely tell in the bottom left hand of the corner frame. You can definitely tell it's out of focus. So this was just a simple lesson about focus basics and how we use them, how we use the focus, the X and Y plane for focus. So yeah, in this lesson, you learn the truth about focus, autofocus settings, all about toggling, how to do it. Make sure you practice toggling every single day, and how focus works in your camera. So are you ready for the next lesson? We're going to talk about autofocus settings and how to focus with still subjects, how to focus with moving subjects. So there's two settings that we're going to go back and forth with, and I'm going to teach you what those two settings are to make sure we get the most amount of focus with still subjects versus moving subjects. So here we go.